Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. We're going to look at the cultural context in A Doll's House by Henrik Ibsen. We've already covered the cultural context in The Great Gatsby, and later in the week we're going to look at the cultural context in John Crowley's Brooklyn. Okay, so I'm just going to continue on with the slides here. Okay, we're going to look at the setting first. Okay, the play is set in a middle-class environment. The stage directions at the beginning of the play tell us that the home is in a room furnished comfortably and tastefully, but not extravagantly. And this represents the Helmers very well. They're middle-class, they're not extravagant, they're not rich, but they're not poor. The tastefully decorated is a sign that they make a big effort in order to portray a family that is doing well for itself. During the era of the play, Norway had a thriving economy which allowed people to work hard and better themselves. This resulted in an obsession with money. Okay, so you hear later on in the play that Torvald worked so hard in the pursuit of money and a better life that he actually made himself sick, and at the point where he could have lost his life, only for Nora to intervene with a trip to Italy. Okay, the play is set in a Norwegian town around 1879. So in terms of the three texts that we're looking at, this is the first chronologically, okay, so it's a lot further back than the 1920s of Great Gatsby and the 1950s of Brooklyn. Okay, so just going to continue. Social class. Okay, in all the texts we've studied, social class is central to the cultural context of each text. Okay, social class being, if you remember from Gatsby, social class wasn't just money in Gatsby, it was reputation and family name and your respectability. It wasn't just money. In this text, I suppose, when we look at social class, social class does equal money. The Helmers know what it is like to have little money, and we are worried that any loss of finance will result in a damage to their social status. Okay, so if you remember at the beginning, when Torvald finds out he's got a job at the job at the bank, he's very, very happy because it means a step up the ladder. But he's also worried that this could be taken away at any time. He's worried about a loss of finance. Because of Helmer's opposition to loans, it is up to his wife Nora to take out an illegal loan to save his life. Helmer believes people who borrow it will end badly for them. So he's against borrowing, but it's up to Nora to take out the illegal loan. Respectability is really important in the play, and the male character's fear can be taken away at any moment. So I suppose Torvald's big fear is that he will lose his respectability, and in the end, it does actually happen. His wife walks out the door. The veneer of respectability is definitely lost for Helmer. Krogstad is only too aware of what can happen as a result of the loss of respectability. He forges a resignature, resulting in his loss of social status. Okay, if you think about it, how Helmer treats Krogstad because of the one error he made, and when we read into the book and we find out why he did what he did, and there was a reason for it. Okay, so Torvald sacks Krogstad, which sets the chain of events in motion, and he sacks him for being too familiar with him. So just for being friendly with him in the office, he didn't like it. And it shows Torvald's snobbery and insecurity about his social standing. So he basically sacked a man and ruined his entire livelihood because he was too friendly with him. Because how it would look. So again, it shows the cultural context in that respectability and reputation were everything. And he had this appearance, Helmer had this appearance to keep up. And Krogstad being friendly with him was going to tarnish that. So he just sacked him. Okay, no, didn't even think about it. And when Nora begged him to give him the job back, he said, "How would it look if people knew my wife could influence me?" Okay, so that appearance is everything for Torvald. Okay, continue with social class here. We see how important keeping up appearances is to Torvald when he finds out about the loan. He tells Nora the relationship will stay the same in the eyes of the world, but in reality it will be a sham. So he finds out about this loan. He's absolutely seething. He tells Nora their marriage is over, but she will still stay in the house. To the outside world, everything will remain the same. Now, to a modern audience, that is bordering on the absurd, okay? But it shows his how much keeping up appearances mean to him, okay? And look at the quote in the next line, and this quote, very useful in your essays. From this moment, happiness is not the question. All that concerns us is to save the remains, the fragments, the appearance. So, one of the biggest things in his life the only thing he is concerned about is the appearance. He's telling Nora he no longer wants to be her husband, or he doesn't want her as his wife, but we're not going to tell the world. And when Nora leaves, one of the most telling lines is, "And you don't consider what people will say." So he does mention the fact that children won't have a mother and that he losing his wife, but his biggest priority is you don't consider what people will say. So again, what we're trying to do here is highlight how much appearance and respectability, how important it is to people in this society. And Helmer is reflective of people of this era. The nurse who looked after Nora had to give her own child away to work for Nora's family, and when questioned about it, replied, "A poor girl who has got in trouble should be glad to." Okay, so a poor girl who has and got in trouble is a euphemism there for getting pregnant. She said she should be glad to give her child away if it means working for a respectable family like the Helmers. Okay, so that's just the attitude. If you don't have money, then you can't really argue. Okay, family. We'll look at the family structures in the three texts. Very different family structures in all three texts. So at the start of the play, the Helmers seem happy and Nora does all she can to make the house perfect for Christmas. She says at one point that she's at her happiest when everything's perfect for Torvald. Okay, so everything's designed to make Torvald happy. Nora does love her children, but does not carry out the normal duties of a mother, instead leaving that to the family nurse. She calls her daughter "my sweet little baby doll," echoing the names that Torvald gives Nora. Okay, and the word doll, I suppose, very, very important in this play. At the end, she recognises that she treats her children like dolls, and that her father treated her like a doll, and that her husband now treats her like a doll. Basically, that men treat women like dolls. They're there to be looked at, there to be played with, but they're not there to be taken seriously. She plays hide and seek with them and seems to be more like an older sister than a mother. This role would have been approved of by Victorian audiences who believed that a woman's role was that of a wife and mother. So Victorian audiences would have had no problem with the fact that she played with her children the way she did and that the nurse looked after her, because it was part of the social status they had that they were able to afford a nurse to do those type of things. Okay, family continued. Torvald sees his role as the head of the household and has little regard for the children unless it is a reflection of him as a man. So doesn't really care for the children. It was expected in this era that you had a wife and children, so he has provided, the children are there, but it's there to make him look good. Doesn't really have any interactions with the children as such. Nora plays with them, the nurse looks after them, they're there to look good for him, just as Nora's there as the trophy wife. They're the trophy kids. Torvald's attitude when he finds out about the loan highlights what a sham marriage, what a sham the marriage has been, and Nora reflects she was simply a doll wife to Torvald in the same way she was a doll child for her father. So throughout her life, she realises that she's never made any decisions for herself, and she has this epiphany, and she goes through a kind of an awakening. She realises she has played with the children as dolls, and that she is not fit to be a mother until she grows up. She resists the pleas from Torvald and says the children are in better hands than mine. So she's very aware of the situation. Her eyes have been opened to the world that she lives in. And Ibsen, very clever in this. Nora represents society and the fact that the society needs to wake up, just like Nora has done, and see that women can't be treated in this way. Okay, and if you think about 1879, a long way back, we're still having conversations about gender pay gaps and the role of men and women in society and how women are treated. You can imagine the uproar in 1879 when Ibsen put forward these types of views, and we'll see later in the video here about some of the reaction in places like Germany when it was first launched. Okay, gender. Gender is the same as the role of men and women. We talk about, again, central to the cultural context of all three texts that we study, central to most cultural contexts, even today's world, a big part to play. Gender is a big discussion. Okay, we talk, Gillette last year had the toxic masculinity and the Me Too campaign. So gender and the role of men and women, it's always going to play a big part in the cultural context of any era, whether 1879 Norway or modern day Western culture. Okay, the play is set in a patriarchal society where men are in charge and women are there to act as wives and mothers. Men must be in charge at all times, hence why Nora has to hide the loan from Torvald. who would have been embarrassed by his reliance on his wife. Yeah, a man couldn't rely on his wife. It was the other way around. Women were helpless, weak individuals who must be helped by the man. Torvald would have been astounded that Nora could find her way to the bank, let alone sign and forge a signature. He couldn't have envisaged that at all. When he finds out about the loan, Torvald tells Nora no man would sacrifice his honour for the one he loves. So he says he would work night and day to help her repay the loan, but he couldn't sacrifice his honour. And in his honour there, he means his respectability and his the appearance that he has and what he his upkeep of his appearance. Krogstad suffers because of the pressure for men to provide, as we see his relationship with Christine falls apart because he does not have the means to support her. She marries someone wealthier instead. Now, you're looking for direct comparisons. This is exactly the same as Gatsby and Daisy. Okay, so Krogstad, like Gatsby, was in love with a woman but couldn't provide the life that she wanted. Okay, didn't have the money. So she goes off and marries someone with money. Okay, so very, very similar in that regard. Okay, I'll try not to mention Gatsby too much. We will be doing a video at the end of the 3 videos where we try to put all 3 together and look at answering a question. Okay, we're going to continue with gender here. Okay, Nora is treated like a child by Torvald. He hands her money as if handing pocket money to a child. Okay, yeah, you see at the start of the play, and it's intriguing to modern audiences at the beginning, where she's hiding macaroons and she's asking for money, and money does equal power in this play, and I suppose money in a lot of worlds equals power. When telling Christine about working to pay back the loan, she tells her it was like being a man. This shows the gender roles in the text. Okay, she says that working hard and paying back the loan to her was like being a man, and she was yearning for this power. She felt power, a sense of powerlessness, and then when she was doing this, she felt a sense of power and she thought this must what it be like to be a man, and she liked it. So, and it shows again the attitudes towards women here, that men were the breadwinners and earned money and paid loans. Women didn't have to do any of that. Another example of the role of women is when Torvald tells Christine that knitting is ungraceful and she should take up embroidery. This is a reference to a woman's need to be pretty rather than functional. Now, this is ridiculous and absurd. Nora does embroidery. Christine does knitting. Knitting was seen as ungraceful because there's no swooping movements, hand movements like embroidery. And the fact that what he's trying to say is basically when women are doing chores like this, that they need to look good. They need to look graceful. So knitting, he said, you shouldn't be knitting, you should be taking up embroidery. So, and again, this need to be pretty. Nora was there as a trophy wife, so she had to be pretty. And again, back to the macaroons that she had to hide. He didn't want her getting heavy or fat, so she had to look good at all times. And the tarantella, this was a big part of the thing as well. Nora's tarantella routine is another example of the gender gap, as she accepts being paraded in front of guests by Torvald and ordered home when Torvald decides he wants to leave. So she was enjoying herself at the Christmas party, but when Torvald wanted to leave, he left. Okay? There was no discussion. Again, treated like a child, and she had to practice the tarantella. Her tarantella routine was a reflection on Torvald. Okay, if she had have underperformed, it would have looked bad on him. So everything was going on that. So everything belonging to, and the word belonging itself shouldn't be used, but everything that belonged to Torvald had to look good. His wife, his kids, everything had to be performed well to keep up appearances. Okay, continuing gender again. In the end, Nora rejects her subservient role in society and leaves Torvald. Even as he tries to convince her, we see his complete lack of awareness of the situation when he says that she only did what she did because of her womanly helplessness. Basically, you're a silly little woman, you're so helpless, and that's why you did it. And from now on, he will advise and direct her. I'm here to look after you. You don't have to make decisions. I'll just do all that. He even tells her she is more attractive to him because of her feminine weakness. So basically, you're a silly little girl, and you know what? I like being the man to look after you and take care of you, and I'll do that for you. Okay, when the play was first performed, now this is important, I mentioned it earlier, the outrage in some countries. Some performances altered the ending and Nora didn't leave, which outraged Ibsen. Okay, so in Germany, the woman playing Nora decided that this was just outrageous, that a woman would walk out on her kids. So she refused to do it and they had her staying in the end. But Ibsen was outraged. But when you look at it, and I just have it here, it highlighted that the cultural context of the times was so set that for a woman to do this was completely against the normal values of the time. So you can imagine that throughout the world, how this was, and I mean, Jeremy, we're talking about countries that now would be seen as progressive Western societies. This, but you can imagine how this went down across the world. Okay, so Ibsen wanted to make a statement about the role of men and women, and it was very well done, but people didn't accept it. And it makes me think about Bono's speech that we did from the exam papers on at Penn State, the graduation ceremony. We talked about blind spots, and we'll come to that later when we talk about, do we have sympathy for Torvald in any of this? Okay, marriage. Okay, marriage. We see marriage in all three texts as well. It's a big part of it. You have Tom and Daisy and Gatsby, and you have Eilish and Tony in Brooklyn. So we're going to compare the marriages here. Okay, the marriages of Nora and Torvald is more like a parent-child relationship. Torvald dictates what Nora eats and scolds her for eating sweets. Remember, she hides the macaroons, and absolutely absurd. She's not allowed to eat what she wants. And even worse, at one point Torvald takes hold of Nora by the ear, which he thinks is a playful act, but it clearly shows the power he has in relationships. Okay, if you think of the optics of that, grabbing someone by the ear, even if you're doing it in a playful way, it's showing a power base there, and there's a real gap in the power. So he had all the power, and he was able to lead her by the ear. Very demeaning. Okay, Torvald doesn't like Nora talking about life before him, which shows he wants the relationship to be about him at all times. So he doesn't know who Christine is and never heard of her. And she's surprised at this, but Nora reveals that she's not allowed to talk about life before Torvald. Torvald is shocked when they get back from the party, and Nora refuses to sleep with him. And he says, you won't. He's questioning, basically, like, what are you talking about? You're not going to bed with me? Am I not your husband? So he's in complete shock there that she would basically reject him. In the one act of true love, Nora takes out a secret loan to save Torvald's life, and ironically, it is this loan that leads to the breakup of their marriage. So Nora did it out of love, because she did save her husband's life, and it ends up that, I suppose tragically, that is the breakup of their marriage. Okay, Torvald is in love with the idea of Nora rather than the reality of Nora. So that trophy wife, he wants, basically, she's there to look good. He doesn't want to hear about this woman who wants independence or to find herself. You're there to look good. You have no other role in society. He treats her like a child throughout, and then accuses her in the final scene of acting like a child who does not understand the conditions of the world. Okay, there's a question here, do we feel sorry for Torvald? Okay, Torvald's completely wrong in everything that he does, but you have to ask the question, why does he act the way he does? And he is limited by the cultural context, and that's often the question, is how are characters limited or inhibited by their cultural context? And Torvald behaves the way he does because that's the way he's been brought up. It's the way society has told him to behave, and he thinks he's doing nothing. He's like a rabbit caught in headlights. He has no concept of what is happening. It's as if his whole world is unraveling around him, and he just doesn't understand the world he lives in. And again, I go back to Bono and the blind spot. He didn't know, he didn't understand anything that he did was wrong. So I suppose you can feel sorry for him here, with obviously acknowledging that he's completely wrong, but you can feel sorry for him. Okay, and I suppose there's an irony there, and he treats her like a child throughout. And in the last scene, I suppose, like a child, grows up and wants independence. That's exactly what Nora does, and the child leaves home. Okay, Christine Lynn had to marry a man she didn't love because she needed money to provide for her family. Okay, her rekindled relationship with Krogstad offers the audience some hope of marriage and the concept that love and marriage will be linked. Okay, so Torvald and Nora, we understand love is not part of their marriage. It's not a love-based marriage. Like a lot of marriages at that time, convenience and money was a big part, security. So the fact that Christine Lind and Krogstad get back together is Ibsen hinting of a better future where people will get married for love as opposed to money. Okay, so if you like today's video, you can hit like and subscribe to the channel. There'll be more Leaving Cert content, English content coming in the coming days and weeks. Okay, we're going to be looking at Brooklyn later this week, and next week we're going to be hopefully having 3 videos on literary genre on the same 3 texts. Okay, thank you.